Hi, everyone, and welcome to American Freedom Watch Radio. This is your host, Karen Schoen, and we are brought to you live on repatriateradio.com. Please visit our website, agenda21today.com, panhandlepatriots.com, americaismyname.com, and agenda21today.com. Folks, today I'm talking to you from Texas. What a surprise. And I am collaborating on a movie that is called Behold a Pale Horse. Behold a Pale Horse is a Charlie Daniels production, and part one has already been completed. You can purchase part one for those of you that are having a movie night in your clubs. Please go to www.beholdapalehorse.tv and see the trailer. You will be amazed at the wonderful people who are collaborating on this film. Make an order. Tell them you're from the Tea Party. Tell them you're from whatever group it is you're from, and we will make sure that you get a wholesale copy that you'll be able to distribute throughout your organization. Folks, if you thought 2016 was good, wait till you see this one, because this one shows you how this plan is being implemented by the people who are involved in 2016. So the website is www.beholdapalehorse.tv, and I will put it up on our website. Excuse me. We are going to be joined shortly by Karen Bracken, who will be taking over the show for me today as I work on this film, because we want to get it out in a timely manner. So Karen Bracken will be joining us. John, I don't believe, made it today. He's on an oil rig. Unfortunately, we're not drilling, as you well know. Unfortunately, although this president is going out and saying how he is producing jobs, more and more information is coming out showing that the jobs that he is producing are overseas. What a surprise. So, sometimes, folks, the lies are just so incredible. It absolutely amazes me as to how he gets away with the lies that he gets away with. But I guess when you're working with the media that follows you around and follows and controls your lies, it makes it easier for you to be able to get them out there. And it's really a shame. It is such a shame. We could have had such a magnificent country if we paid attention. And that's going to be our job, because if we think that whoever wins this election is going to be the end of the election, we have another thing coming. This is the beginning, not the end. So my question to you is, what are you going to do on September 7th and 8th and 9th, November 7th, 8th, and 9th, when the election is over? I know everybody is focused on the election, but what are we going to do when the election is over? We have a country that we're going to lose if we don't pay attention. And that's what this is all about, and that's what we're all about. Folks, one of the things I want you to pay attention to is what's going on in your colleges. I got an email yesterday, and I want to share it with you. This was an email that was sent to me by someone in Brevard County, Florida. And apparently there is a teacher in Brevard County, Florida, in Brevard Community College. And this teacher is giving out, she's a math teacher, she is giving out pledges to her students to have them pledge to vote for Obama. Folks, we've been talking about indoctrination. We have been talking about propaganda. This is the biggest, most upfront example of what this group of people are capable of doing as they steal our children one by one. So it is up to us to be vigilant. It is up to us to pay attention. And it is up to us watch and make known what is happening. And we cannot allow our children to be manipulated by this group of people. It is something that we absolutely cannot do. You have to pay attention to what's going on in the schools. You must read the books that your children are reading. You must look at the programs that they are getting. Because what is happening now is the transferring from books into computer programming is unbelievable. Why do they want to use computer programming and not books? Why do they want to use computer programming and not books? They want to use computer programming because computer programming does not enable you to see what is going on. If your child is working on a computer program, it's not the same as your child working on a textbook. So if they're working on a computer program, then what you're going to have to do is pay attention to that program, and that is very, very important. Excuse me. Texas is very, very dry. Very beautiful, very dry, very, very beautiful, vast, huge. Very, very unique, and I would say very, very Texan. Lots of vast land space, something I am not used to seeing in Florida. Florida is very flat. Texas is not. But what a gorgeous country we have, folks. We cannot afford to let this be lost. We cannot afford that to happen. It is so important for that not to happen. John, as I said, is not going to be able to be with us today, but let's talk about oil. And let's talk about for a minute what is going on in the Middle East. We all know, we've all seen, we all hear, and we all can make our own conclusion. Again, we are being lied to. What is happening in the Middle East is not what you think. And how can I say that? Because we have to think back to what is going on in our lives today and why this is happening. What does the Middle East have? The Middle East has oil, lots and lots of oil. What's happening with our oil prices? They are going up and up and up. Why are we not drilling? Because we have a group of people that are environmentalists who are basically stopping us from drilling, and also because Agenda 21 calls for the oil prices to be higher, of which they are not high enough. Well, if the Middle East goes up in smoke and our oil prices go up, guess what's going to happen? America will start drilling. So you have to think past what's going on and look at what is the reality of what's going on. And someone is with me today. Is that Karen? Hello? We have a little bit of a confusion on the line. Hello?
Ed?
Hi there, Ed. How are you?
Doing okay.
Yes, folks, I am very happy to be joined by Ed Braddy today. And Ed is going to talk to you about the words that we keep on hearing. They are sustainable development. What a surprise. Most people have no idea what a sustainable development is. And Ed is going to give us a really good explanation, but not just about sustainable development, because it's not just about the houses. It's a lot deeper than that. So welcome, Ed. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, of course, thank you for having me.
I was telling everybody I'm in Texas, And I'm in a place where the phone reception is not as good as it should be. However, you have great reception, so that's good. So if anything happens and I drop off, I will be right back. So not to worry.
Okay, I got you.
Okay. But Ed, I would like you to start telling everyone where and what is going on with sustainable development. What does that mean? What does it mean to them? And what can they look for as this is now creeping into every community?
Well, thank you. And the group I'm with is called the American Dream Coalition, and I encourage people to go to our website, which is AmericanDreamCoalition.org. O-R-G, it's all one word. And we put a lot of stuff up there. And one of the things we do is we look at the way the other side tries to mask, really, their coercive policies through the language, through some feel-good language. And sustainable development is perhaps the one that has the most currency in the public at large. Is the one that sounds the friendliest and the least intrusive or the least worrisome. But really it comes in terms of if you just look at policies that are being adopted, they are masked by a whole bunch of different terms. So sustainable development is, of course, one, but many people in your audience may have heard terms like smart growth or new urbanism or compact cities or resilient cities or the traditional neighborhoods concept, or the latest one is livable communities. Because if you're not doing what they do, then I guess the alternative is deadable. But anyway, so they call it now livable, as if we haven't been living before. But all of these bring with them a whole host of policies that are adopted at the local level that essentially try to usher in a command and control economy. That is an economy commanded by the handful of sort of elitist bureaucrats.
Well, Ed, the sustainable development, how did this concept happen? Because I used to be, honestly, I was a builder. And at one time we were building sustainable properties. And one of the things that I noticed as we were going forward, we never took any government subsidies. We never asked anybody for anything. And when people came over to us and said, are your houses LEED certified? Our answer was, why would we want to do that? Could you explain what that means so that people know what to look for?
Well, yeah, the LEED certification is part of what's called the Green Building Program, and there is kind of a distinction. There are things that do in fact lead to improved efficiencies, and I think consumers wouldn't mind those. The problem is that oftentimes the higher costs are not talked about. I think if you're up front with people and you say, look, we would like to have this kind of insulation for your walls is a better standard, but it comes at a higher cost. Therefore, leave it up to the consumers to decide. I think that's fine and acceptable. But what unfortunately has started to happen with a lot of the LEED green building programs is they get to a different nature, such as, well, let's have a thermostat control device that can be centrally controlled so that, if we're beginning to approach peak power in our community, then the regional utility can offset the power controls in residential developments. That's when it's getting a little bit too creepy, way too creepy in terms of government coercion. So there is a distinction to be made. The problem is that the smart growth control freaks use that distinction, that there's on the one hand, responsible things, technologies that can be adopted, and on the other hand, there's coercive policies that can be enacted, and they blur the distinction and try and get communities to adopt all of it, and that is where I think the biggest problem is. Yeah,
I happen to agree with you. The other day, folks, listen to this one. we got an email, or got a letter in the mail from our power company, and they want to put in a new programmable from your computer thermostat. And that thermostat is going to help me save energy. Now, that thermostat is going to interact with my computer, which means that, first of all, if my computer goes out, my thermostat will probably go out because the programming will go out. Secondly, it means that they will have a copy of what I'm doing on their server. So if I decide I want to go to sleep at 10 o'clock and I want the heat to go down a little bit because I don't need it or the cold to go up a little bit because I don't need it because we're sleeping, they're going to know what I'm doing. They're going to know when I'm doing it. And what happens if they make a decision? And they say, gee, Karen, we noticed you turned the thermostat to 78. Well, we think you should turn it up to 80.
Right.
What control am I going to have?
Right. And therein lies the central problem with this whole movement. Whereas technology is wonderful and we're doing many things. I mean, I would like a personalized programmable thermostat so that if I leave and go to work and it's like, oops, I forgot to turn off the air and no one's going to be in the house all day, then maybe I can go on my smartphone or on my computer and do it. But I absolutely do not want a utility bureaucrat during the hot summer when I have my kids and we're all playing around. I don't want them to come and turn off my air conditioning because they feel I'm consuming too much power. You know, as long as I'm willing to pay for it, I should be allowed to put the thermostat wherever the heck I want it.
Also, I think it's in the Clear Air Act, I'm not sure, don't quote me on that one, but in one of the acts it says that by 2016, all of the appliances will have to have computer chips in them which will interact with the smart meters. Now, think about that one, folks. Now you've got smart meters, which, by the way, have been proven to be dangerous. People that have them on their homes, they are experiencing headaches, tinnitus. What it's doing is if you have some kind of ailment, it makes it worse, makes it more pronounced. This is proven. The doctors, one of the doctors' associations, it's on our website, has already made claims. They know what this is doing to our health, and you don't have to accept those. You do not have to accept them. Listen to what I'm saying. You do not have to accept them. In the Clear Air Act, it says that they can be put on at the customer's request. So if you do not request them, you don't have to have one. And from what we have learned, from what Ed has learned, from what I have learned from Ed and people like Ed who have been doing phenomenal investigative work on this, is they are very dangerous. They are emitting radio waves through your house, and especially if you're living in a house that has multiple units. You have all of these smart meters all together in one place, and it shoots right through your walls. So you're being shot with radio frequency waves built by a Chinese company. The same company that brought us Chinese drywall, counterfeit parts for our aircraft, poisonous food for our animals, poisonous things for our children, are providing the smart meters. Would we really want those on our homes? I certainly don't. Group after group after group, they're getting together in their local communities. They're going to their communities. They are telling their county commissioners. They're telling their mayors, we do not want them here. We want an opt-out. We don't want them at all. Any of those things. You have the power to do that. You have the power.
You know, one of the things I encourage activists to do when they go before their local councils and county governments, etc., is to really question the assumptions that many of their policies are based on. For example, let's go back to where we started with sustainable development. that term kind of got coined back years ago by the United Nations, and the definition they use says, meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, obviously, for a lot of people, the fact that it sort of derives out of the United Nations is problem enough, but I would go even further and just look at the actual statement there, because one of the things it assumes, and I would say assumes incorrectly, is that we know exactly what future generations need. I don't know what they need. I don't know how much agricultural space is actually needed, to feed the population in the year 2050, and so I'm not going to use my ignorance of that to, say, stop a housing development on the urban fringe, because I'm going to claim that somewhere down the road we might need that for corn or soybeans or whatever. So a lot of the assumptions that are built into the whole sustainable development argument are just flatly wrong, or at the very least, they're unknown. We just don't know.
This is based on a premise that is called outcome-based economy. And what that means is the outcome is planned before it happens. So therefore, somebody knows what the outcome is going to be of your life. Think about that.
Yeah.
Somebody is determining the outcome of your life. Who is that somebody? That takes it out of your hands.
This goes all the way back to the progressive era of the late 1800s and early 1900s, when really people, sort of the Woodrow Wilson school of thought that said, actually life can be reduced to really a sort of a scientific management formula. So if we can just get the little people to stop telling us what to do and, let the trained experts, the elite opinion makers, let us decide for everyone else, then we'll reach our heaven on earth, our social utopia. Of course, that didn't work out, and a lot of those ideas led to the bloodbath of World War I. But nonetheless, the progressive mindset really hasn't changed. They still believe, like what you're hinting at, they still believe that, really a handful of people can really make all the decisions for the rest of us, and they know what we want. Now, how it plays out on a local level is really through their push for mass transit, their push for compact development, their push to sort of retrofit our cities from how they are and how we like them to how they envision them somewhere down the road, where we all live in tiny cramped apartments and take light rail to work instead of our own cars. And again, their assumptions are wrong in terms of whether or not that's good for the environment or bad. And more importantly, it's coercive. It's an infringement on private property, and it's an infringement on just individual sovereignty.
And folks, it is so egregious when you think about this. And here's the real problem, Ed, that I've been noticing. If we take Agenda 21 and we say it's like a huge jigsaw puzzle, and everybody has a little tiny piece, and as a result of you having a piece, me having a piece, we all work on our own little piece. Nobody ever really realizes what it means to put all of that together. And somebody has created the master plan that puts it all together. And that somebody is going to wind up controlling our lives. And when somebody else other than you controls your life, that's called slavery. So think about that. As we are progressing and accepting these little sustainable things that have these cutesy-sounding names, which are really doublespeak for, I'm going to take this away from you because I can. And I'm going to take this away from you because I can. And we'll take that little piece of land, and we'll rezone this little plot, and we'll re-put that little acre, and we'll redo that. And this is what this is leading to, until all of a sudden the humans, us, are pushed into these little areas that are called sustainable development. Why? Because we're sustaining the future? No. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do so that we can be controlled. And
I would say that what happens is a lot of it has to do with what I call the bird's eye view versus the person's view, which is if you accept the idea that people are nothing more than like Lego pieces, and I have kids, so I always make analogies to toys. But we have Lego. They look at our cities as basically a Lego village in which they can just move the pieces around and all of that. Essentially, that's a bird's eye view. They're looking down and they say, "Oh, wouldn't it be neat if everyone hopped on the bus to get to their place of work, and then we'll design an efficient route for them." Well, the problem is that we don't live by the bird's eye view. We live by our individual view, which makes what they want to do terribly inefficient. And here's an example. If all I did was acted like the Lego piece who gets up, goes to work, and goes straight home and minds my manners, then fine. Yeah, put a bus route next to where I live and everything will be fine. But you know what? I may have to run out to the grocery store that morning. I have to see my kids practice after school. I forgot to get the medicine at the pharmacy. And by the way, it reminds me I have a doctor's appointment to look at my knee, and then I need to get supplies for the pool. So suddenly, abiding by their plans is terribly inefficient on a personal level. And one of the things that makes So when you come down to this thing that on the individual level it's inefficient, but on the central control planning level it's very efficient, gee, which one should we do? Well, we need to look no further than the United States Constitution, which empowers us with individual liberties. Government is designed to be limited so that the individuals can have the maximum amount of freedom, and that answers your question as to which side should we get on. Should we get on the central planners, or should we get on the side of individual liberty? And we should always be on the side of individual liberty.
Well, central planning has been around, even though they've given it a new name and they're calling it sustainable development. It's been around for years and years and years. And you know what? It never worked. So think about that one. Why are we being forced?
Right. This is one of the most confounding things, I think, in political culture going back ages, is that you have people, and some of them are very kind and sincere, and they mean well, and they just, for whatever reason, and some aren't, I grant you, some are nefarious and conniving and all that, but even some of them who are nice and genuine just seem convinced that despite thousands of years of human history, countless examples of trying to plan utopia on Earth, and massive failures resulting in widespread human misery and death, they still believe they can do it. Just give us one more shot, and we'll make it work this time. But it never works. It never works. Think about that, and remember that central planning, outcome-based planning, never works. Why does it never work? Right. Well, I'd say one of the reasons why is you use the one of the great minds of conservative thought, Frederick Hayek, who had coined the term the fatal conceit, and he says the fatal conceit of centralized planners is that is the knowledge problem. They assume that they have enough knowledge of what is needed to make everyone function in a perfectly happy society. But the problem is that's impossible. It's impossible for any. I mean, you could get 10 Einsteins, put them in a room, and they could not figure out the needs of my town of Gainesville, Florida, population 130,000. The reason why is because you have 130,000 people, all with their different desires, dreams, goals, all with different timelines, appointments, schedules, all with different living, wage potential, earnings, savings, investment. So when you take just one person's stuff and then you multiply it by 130,000, there's simply no way an elite band of thinkers can come up with a solution for all of that. Yet they won't surrender the idea. So yes, they centrally plan. They try to take decisions out of our authority and take care of it for us, and then it always backfires because they simply don't have enough knowledge to make decisions. Yeah, here's an example. Here's a great example, I think, between personal planning and private planning, or and public planning. If we make public plans for you to go out to Texas and we're going to arrange for air carriers to get there, and we're going to arrange for baggage to pick you up, taxis, and all of that. The problem is, what if something goes wrong? Now, if you're Karen and you make your own personal plan, then you can make adjustments. You can make adjustments. You can call in for a different flight schedule. You can arrange for a different taxi service if you don't like the price. You can coordinate all that on the own. You also bear the risk of that. If you make a mistake, you own the risk. You pay whatever's extra, whatever, and your costs are not imposed on me or anyone else. But if we try to centrally plan your vacation and then something goes wrong or something goes unexpected, well, I can tell you the taxi vendor is still going to want his money because, by God, he's got a contract. The air carrier has already made, is now under reservation for that seat, and they can't let anyone else on there because it's now centrally planned. And the costs, if there are any additional costs, they're going to be spread out on everyone else, whether we had a role in it or not. So there's nothing wrong with private planning, planning on the individual or family level, but there's just a host of problems with public planning.
Well, public planning is also, and exactly like what Ed said, if you have 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 different people, you have 20,000 different plans. And there is no way that you can accomplish that without restricting the movement of the people, which then comes to the next set of when I saw what Ed had done, and people should go and take a look on Ed's website and take a look at the PowerPoint, which is also on agenda21today.com in the presentation section, and see the truth about what mass transit really is, and what these trains to nowhere and all of these buses that are empty, the trains that are empty, that we are being coerced into paying for, and what the purpose is behind them. And could you talk about that? Because when you gave that explanation about transportation and what it really was, I was astounded.
Well, sure, I'd be happy to. And many, really, it's so multifaceted. So if I don't hit exactly on what you're at, make sure you bring me back to it. But the biggest issue going on with transportation policy now, and if many of your listeners are continue to scratch their heads and wonder why our transportation policies at the local, state, and federal levels are so convoluted, complicated, and expensive, the most important thing to understand is that transportation policy is not about transportation. It's about power. That's what it's about. It is about the vision of the anointed who believe, mistakenly, but unfortunately they have the authority to implement it, they believe that mass transit, can be used as the catalyst to transform our communities into their high-density urban environments. When you think about mass transit, keep this in mind. What the planners are really talking about is higher population densities, compact living, compact development, because that's the only way transit will work, is if you crowd enough people into a small enough living area. Say, we usually use the square mile as a metric. So you may say, I live in a city about 2,200 people per square mile. San Francisco's at about 6,000 people per square mile. Manhattan is about 50,000 people per square mile. And one of the things planners always want to do is increase population densities to get us closer and closer to Manhattan. Now, there's not enough political stomach in most communities to go there, but so they'll start with Portland style, and then they'll go up to San Francisco style, and et cetera, and try try and increase population densities that way. But that's really what's behind the whole push for mass transit. One of the things we document on our website is if you take the smart growth advocates at their word and they say it's all about the environment, well, we can show conclusively that mass transit doesn't help the environment because it pollutes on a per passenger mile basis. It pollutes just as much as an automobile does. In many cases, it does worse because they don't fill up most of the buses, so most of them are riding around with only 4 or 5 passengers on them. And automobiles are becoming more fuel efficient by the year. So whether you're concerned about greenhouse gas emissions or not, it doesn't matter. The auto still beats the bus any day of the week. And so it's not really about what a lot of them say it's about. Now, there are some people who sincerely believe that, and they just need to be educated. But for others, they always have used the environment argument as just a cover to really just promote higher population densities. And that's what they really want with transit. So what you get in these communities is you get, first, the push. They use the problem that's pretty much everywhere, which is traffic congestion. And they approach communities and they say, we know you're concerned about traffic congestion. We can't keep widening roads. We can't build our way out of congestion, yada, yada, yada. So what we really need to do is introduce transportation choice. That is, we need to increase the frequency of bus routes and spend lots of money on mass transit, preferably light rail, but it could just be rubber tire transit, etc. And then, once they get a ton of money for that, it'll be completely ineffective. Nationally, transit has about a less than 5% market share. Even in super dense cities, really only Chicago and New York City even break 10% of mass transit market share. Most major cities in the U.S. are somewhere between 5 and 7%. And the overall impact of transit is less than 5% nationwide. So it's always ineffective. And so what they'll come back then, Karen, and they'll say is, well, it's only effective because we don't have the population densities. But they won't come out and say we need to cram everybody into apartments. What they'll say is we need urban infill. We need mixed-use zoning. And those are the things, again, that come across. They sound kind of good. They sound rather innocent. And ultimately they convince, local governments to adopt them, and then the coercion begins. If you wanted to build single-family subdivision, suddenly the fees and the penalties and the delays are so high that you simply can't do it. You have to do it their way.
Exactly, and you know what else I noticed? I was traveling down in South Florida, and all of a sudden on roads that never had tolls, they're beginning to have tolls. And what they're trying to do, folks, is push you off the roads and into these transit systems so that they can control your movement. And they use words like, we have to control squall. And then they show a picture, or blight, and they'll show a picture of a rural community that the homes may look different. Every home is not the same. Every garden is not the same. Every garden doesn't have the same flowers. Some people may be growing things. Some people may not. Some people may have trees. Some people may not. And all of a sudden, that becomes horrible. Horrible. How can you live like that? How can people not have the same thing? So the idea and the whole concept of this is that one size shoe fits all. Everybody has to have exactly the same thing. Every community must be the same color. Every house must be the same shape. Every person is going to have the same amount of space in which to live. Every activity has to be controlled and be the same, and community after community loses its individuality.
One of the funniest on the lighthearted side of this, if you go to these smart growth, new urbanist, sustainable development websites, almost all of them at some point have some statement in there that if you adopt these policies, this will help you preserve your community's unique sense of place. I see that phrase used over and over again, unique sense of place. Yet, as you're pointing out, it's so true that what they really mean is we're going to be uniquely like Portland, Oregon. Ultimately, it's all going to come down to looking like the mecca of smart growth, Portland, because they all of the planners tend to take their annual pilgrimage there, and your local officials will they'll get all misty-eyed talking about how awesome that city is and stuff. And there's so many metrics wrong with Portland. It has one of the highest of the nation's underemployment rate. The families are running away because you can't get a house with a yard. Minorities are fleeing because there's a lack of economic opportunity. But the point is, whatever you do, once a city embraces smart growth, it stops being unique. It just becomes like many of the other cities that are going down this road. And it begs the question, well, then what can be done, or what's the alternative? And, when I get into, the problems of central planning and how, who in the world can, come up with answers for tens of thousands of people with their own set of thousands of issues and stuff like that. The Founding Fathers had a real simple, and I would say rather elegant response to that, which is limit the scope of government and empower people with private property rights and individual liberty. Because in a world in which we live in societies, we live in communities, we're not saying, go hide under a rock. We live in societies, we interact with one another, we do all those things. The best thing to do, the most respectful thing to do for your fellow citizens is tend to your private property, and when you need to go outside that, you do so consensually, voluntarily with others. You don't need a bureaucrat saying, well, you have to allow this because I favor this group over there and they need that. So a foundation of property rights and a foundation of individual liberties is exactly the appropriate response to the alternative of central planning. And that's also one reason, Karen, you'll note that in the literature and all of the stuff that promotes this, there is a clear hostility to private property rights among the sustainable development crowd. Some of them are more outspoken about it than others, but the bottom line is a nation that still cherishes private property is a nation that sustainable development will never truly have a foothold. So to the extent we're seeing it take place is a sad admission that we have sort of let our guard down when it comes to preserving our property rights.
Well, now also listen to what the president is saying when he talks about redistribution of wealth, because that sits in the same thing. It doesn't matter what you achieve, your property will be the same. Your individuality of what you want to do with that property will be the same. Your wealth will never exist within that property, because today, if I upgrade my house, if Ed and I have the same house, and I upgrade my house and Ed did not, well, I upgraded my house, it's worth more to me and maybe to the person who's going to buy it. So therefore, if I turn around and I want to sell my house with all of these upgrades that I chose to do, I would be able to get the rewards of that in my personal wealth. If Ed chose not to upgrade, his house would be worth different. Doesn't mean his is bad, good. It just means it's different. And that's the part that these planners cannot handle. They cannot handle the word different. Everything to them must be the same. That's what socialism and communism are really all about. Everybody has to have the same thing at the same time, doing the same thing at the same time. There is no unmasking of personal liberty and freedom and pursuit of happiness, because there is no way to to accumulate wealth. If we all have the same thing, how is wealth created? It can't be. You can't do something different. If I want to take my property and I want to grow cherry trees and then go and sell cherries and improve my property that way and amass personal wealth because that's what I want to do, I should be allowed to do that.
Right.
But the planners are saying no.
Well, I think the planning mindset and the progressive mindset, it sees that phrase in the Declaration that says the pursuit of happiness, and they just leave out pursuit. And they just think it's their job to give everyone equal happiness. But what's really important in that statement is the word the pursuit. We pursue happiness, and you and I may pursue it differently. Like, for example, if we take that same house, we both have a house. I may choose not to upgrade because I want to spend my extra money getting an RV camper because it's very important for me to take my family on a cross-country tour, for example. That's how I'm pursuing happiness. But from a centralized planning standpoint, they would see that you and I ended up moving in different directions on our house, and so they would assume something's wrong. Well, nothing's wrong. You're pursuing happiness one way, I'm pursuing happiness another way. It leads to different outcomes. Both of us are happy and content with these outcomes. I'm not envious of your house. You're not envious of my RV. So everyone's happy. But the planners are mad because they see a difference.
They are looking for planned outcomes. That's what the whole key, that's what the whole thing is all about. They are going to choose, not you, not me, not Ed. They are going to be in control of choosing the outcome of your life. And that's what the whole focus of centralized planning in these sustainable developments are. They have to inventory and control every aspect of human activity to make sure that everything is always the same. There is no difference. Everything is the same. It must be the same. Therefore, they can control the outcome. And today, that's what we are facing. Our children in school are facing outcome-planned education. Your child's future is going to be determined as he goes into school when he's in kindergarten. How is that going to happen? How is that going to make sense? Today the child may want to be a doctor. Tomorrow he may want to be a hairdresser. The next day he may want to be a fireman. Maybe he wants to be a rocket scientist. He's not going to have those choices. Those choices are going to be gone because the destiny, which is your choice, is going to be gone. And you're going to be stuck with the fate of what somebody else has decided and determined for you. And that's why these are so dangerous. Ed, before I let you leave, what can people do to stop this from happening? Because that's the big question, and I want people to not just hear it from Karen all the time, but what do you recommend that they do?
Well, I essentially recommend a two-pronged approach. First is obviously the national dialogue has an impact on this. The Obama administration is big into the whole sustainable development, smart growth agenda. They were pushing, loudly they were pushing the high-speed rail initiative early on. Fortunately, that's sort of dying on the vine. The cost estimates are coming back so high. Even California, of all places, is having second thoughts. And when people in California begin to think twice about spending taxpayer money, then you know it's a bad boondoggle. So, but they have a whole mix of HUD, EPA, and DOT. That's the Housing Urban Development, Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Transportation, all collaborating or conspiring to pass what they call livability grants that they try to get local governments to adopt. And as most people know, because of this economy, many local governments are starving for revenue now. So the federal government is dangling free money out there with the condition that they adopt sustainable development growth management controls. So that's one area for people to be focused on, is on that national dialogue. But where people can get the biggest bang for their buck, in my opinion, is engaging their local city and county governments. Look at your comprehensive plans and your land development codes. Look at the transportation elements. Look at those pieces. Usually those documents can be obtained online. And you can just do a word search for, say, property rights and see if it even shows up in your comprehensive plans. In most documents it doesn't. They don't have any future prescription based on property rights. So you can look there. And then, groups like mine, AmericanDreamCoalition.org, where there's a resource to help. I speak around the city, around the state, and also around the country, to groups that are really trying to fight these coercive controls. I'm a former city commissioner myself, so I was on the inside. I got to see how the sausage got made, and that's where you can begin to look, is at the local level. A lot of people get elected to office. They want to do well, and they're inundated with the planners and the city officials who subscribe to the smart growth worldview. And like I said, they craft it in very clever language, and a lot of it sounds beneficial. And so a lot of elected officials mean well, and they end up adopting bad policies. So, they need help. They need our help.
You're right. They need our help, and you folks need to read these documents. And you can pull apart. And one of the things that you can do is when you're going to one of these meetings, you've got to go to the planning meetings. You've got to start going to the meetings with your county commissioners. You've got to pay attention to what they're saying. And when they start talking about this, ask them if they know what a sustainable development is. One of the things that I like to do is take the list of what's not sustainable and talk to the commissioners and say to them, oh, you play golf? Well, you can't do that anymore because that's not sustainable.
Right.
We're going to shut off the air conditioner in your office because that's not sustainable.
Well, and another thing, Karen, I would add is sustainable is not just on environmental metrics, it's fiscal. And a lot of what they push is not fiscally sustainable. It's not sustainable by the taxpayer. Mass transit is one of the most massively subsidized urban works in the country. And so in a community where, say, 80% of your transportation dollars goes to sustain mass transit, well, how in the world can you expand that? I mean, you can't. You would break the system. So a lot of it may be just educating the elected officials that what they may think is, quote, sustainable is something that, if extended logically, will bankrupt the city.
One of the things that the people in our community did was he wrote a letter to our county commissioners, and he said, in your zealousness to accept this grant, you have given us an equestrian center that no one uses, bike paths that no one uses, sidewalks that no one uses, boat ramps that a few people use. The problem that I see is that the grant money is gone, and now we, the community, are being asked to raise our taxes so that we can maintain these things that no one uses. So you've got to look past just the grant and look what the ramifications are going to be on you in your own community, because they are not sustainable. And the only place that they're going to get money for this is to come back to you and say, we have to raise the taxes now to maintain all of these wonderful things, because somebody's got to pay for it, and it's the money. We have to stop the flow of money. We have to be smarter and realize that money is just a carrot, and that carrot has a tremendous amount of strings. And by accepting that money, you're going to be locked into some form of maintenance, some form of continued raising of taxes to take care of these properties that nobody uses, or maybe a few people use. And there's nothing wrong with having some of these, but what's happening is the overpowering usage of pushing government funds where it doesn't belong.
Yep, no, you nailed it. So, that's the thing, and that's another way to speak in favor of a property rights-based society is what is sustainable is what you're able to carry on your own, and it's not imposed on anybody else, and I don't ask for any redistribution to help me do it. And so, there's really two schools of thought. There's the planner's school of thought, which is sustainable development and all of that, and then there's a property rights school of thought, which used to be the way we lived in this country, and it's kind of gone away, but hopefully me, you, and a bunch of other people can work together and bring it back.
Well, that is key, folks, but there's only Ed, there's only Karen. We need everybody. We need everybody to get engaged. And Agenda 21 contains enough egregious, horrible things that there is something in there for anybody to study, for anybody to understand, and for anybody to speak about in your community, because it's your community where this starts. If your community says no, that's the power of the Constitution. If your community says no, the federal government can't force it upon you. The only way it gets there is if your community says yes. So at this point, I guess Nancy Reagan was right when she said, just say no. So it's as simple as educating yourself, educating your community, and saying, no, we don't want that. It doesn't make sense. It's not for us. It's not economically feasible. There's no science behind it. There's a multitude of reasons. Why does an outsider have to come into our community and tell us how to live? We don't know how to live within our own community. We don't have to accept these plans. We don't have to accept those programs. We don't have to accept anything that's there that we don't want in our community if we work on it together. And that's what things like this, our show, Ed's discussion, my going out and talking, other people talking, that's what it's all about. Getting educated and understanding that no is a power word. And when they try to entice us with money so that they control us, we have the power to say no. And that's what we have to use. We've got to use that word more and more and more. Otherwise, we will see more and more of our property, our liberty, being taken away by a group of people that have no desire to do anything other than control what they don't have right now.
Well said.
Ed, would you please tell everyone your website again?
Sure. It's AmericanDreamCoalition.org, O-R-G. My email address is ed@AmericanDreamCoalition.org. And I can also be reached on the phone at 352-281-5817, and we're here to help. Thank you for having me on.
Ed, thank you so much for joining me today. And folks, we are here to help. That's what this is all about, Americans helping Americans. If we don't do this together, remember, divided we fail, united we will win. And that's what this is all about. So I know everybody's focusing on the vote, but there is going to be an afterlife after the vote. And that afterlife is what we have to pay attention to. And we have to pay attention to these programs which are being put upon us now while we're not paying attention. So it's a lot. I know it's a lot. And thank you all for listening today. And we will come back again. We'll see you next week. You are listening to American Freedom Watch Radio. This is your host, Karen Schoen. We are brought to you live on repatriatradio.com. Please visit our websites, agenda21today.com, panhandlepatriots.com, americaismyname.com, and repatriatradio.com. Thank you all and have a wonderful week. And by the way, make sure you go to beholdapalehorse.tv. Look at that trailer and order that film. It's a great movie night. Thank you all.